Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean go solo live? Have you ever been asked why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Hello, sisters, and welcome to Go Solo Live. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. It's time to sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy my conversation with Beth Whitman as she shares her stories of motorcycles, hiking, mountains, and more. And today's guest is Beth Whitman. Thanks for joining us, Beth.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. Thanks.
You bet. So we're going to dig right in, and I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about how you got started doing solo travel. I know you've been doing it a while.
I have been doing it quite a long time. My first trip, technically, and it's I say technically because it's my first trip abroad, but my next biggest trip was like India and Nepal, and was just a huge monster of a trip. But my first trip was I took a trip with my university and went to Oxford, England. And I went to take a class in classical music course at Oxford. And it was just a 3-week program. But I went with a group, but I went by myself. And I can remember standing at the airport with my legs shaking. I was so nervous about getting on a plane for the first time, all by myself. But I went and I had, a great time, met lovely people. And that was a great experience and just kind of paved the way for many future travels. Another trip that I did shortly after that, because I think I really got the bug at that point, was I was still in college. I took a semester off and I traveled around the U.S. all by myself, jumped in a car. And for 3 months, I traveled from New Jersey out to California and then back. And on that trip, I stayed at a lot of youth hostels. It's on a budget. And what happened was I met people from all over the world who were also staying at those youth hostels. And I thought, man, there is a big world out there. And I'm meeting all these great people. I just have to keep traveling and I have to go to their places and, go see their countries. And that is really, that got me hooked on the big international, wanting to travel internationally.
I think that's a great place to start with our story today, though, Beth, because first of all, I hear a lot of people talking about hostels overseas. I've stayed in them myself, but we have hostels all over the U.S., and it's rarely on U.S. citizens' radars to check them out. And look at what a wide experience you got by staying in a hostel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people don't realize that. And what I ended up doing in my later travels was actually kind of dragging my mom along with me to these youth hostels and getting her to travel, because people also don't realize that even though there's youth in the name, they're for any age. And these days they've developed to such an extent that there's private rooms and there's rooms with bathrooms, as well as the dormitory rooms that are, I don't know what the price is these days, but maybe they'll cost you $20 a night or something, probably more than that. But when I was traveling, it was pretty inexpensive.
Absolutely. It's an affordable way to travel, but there's also this whole community mindset of travelers that it's unlike something that you can really get anywhere else. You certainly can't get it at a hotel.
Well, that's true, because there's community areas like the kitchen. You can all kind of hang out, and there's usually a little living room area and a place where you get to meet other people. And that's where, because I think international travelers have more exposure to the youth hostels, you're going to find a lot of them in the U.S. hostels as well. And so it gives you an opportunity to travel abroad kind of virtually by meeting these other people.
Well, and you can get inspired and make all these great friends that then when you do decide to go to other countries, you may actually have people nearby that have an interest in showing you their town.
Yeah. What's interesting is that I remember meeting a young guy, a Japanese guy that we traveled with a little bit. I think it was a youth hostel in Texas. And 30 years later, I find him on Facebook. So now we're Facebook friends. And I think, oh man, Tominari, I got to go to Japan and come see you after all these years. I don't even think he speaks English, but still just kind of a fun connection. And with the technology these days, because it certainly wasn't around in my early travels, but now you can make all these connections and you can have, long lasting friends.
Facebook makes the world very small.
It does. That's not always a good thing, but it does make it makes travel a lot easier. But I also think it's really important to be unplugged in your travels, just to enjoy in the moment and be able to experience things.
Well, and how do you balance that? Because you actually have you have a website, you have a podcast, you have all sorts of things that you're doing. How do you, when you're traveling, especially because your work is part of being on social, how do you manage it and balance it?
Well, to a certain degree, my work is being on social media, but like I'm no longer on Twitter. So basically, I'm on Facebook, and I actually have fun with Facebook because I can have interactions with people. And to a smaller degree, I'm on Instagram, but I don't feel the urgency to post on Instagram like some people might, or like some people might on Twitter or Snapchat, kind of that real time thing. So I really do make a concerted effort to enjoy the moment, and then maybe spend a little bit of downtime editing my photos on my phone and then uploading when it's convenient to me. So I do try to limit it, and I don't really think that I'm a social media addict like some people are, because I do have a business to run, and it is demanding of my time, and it's my priority. So I just keep that focused.
Absolutely. So you've done this cross-country trip across the U.S., but you've also had a wilder adventure.
I've had a number of wilder adventures. I think probably one of my biggest adventures, and I don't know how wild it was. I guess it depends on your perspective, but I did think it was an adventure. I rode a motorcycle from Seattle to Panama, the country, not Panama City in Florida.
Got it.
So it was, 7,000 miles over 9 weeks. And I actually somehow convinced BMW motorcycles to sponsor me. But what they really did was they loaned me the motorcycle, and they really decked me out with all sorts of great BMW gear. And then I took off on that trip. And the thing about that was that before I left, people told me, you're going to die, you're going to be raped, your motorcycle's going to be stolen, you're going to be tossed in jail. And I just really knew in my heart of hearts that if I treated people well, they were going to treat me well in return. And that's exactly what happened. I had very few issues on that trip. But before I left, and I think especially as women, we run into this where people tell us or make suggestions that we can't do things. And so we talk ourselves out of it. But then what happens is we talk ourselves out of it before we even allow that seed, that idea to come to fruition. And it's so frustrating for me because I do it myself. But I try to catch myself too and say, hey, do you really think you can't do that? Or, let's explore this a little bit and figure out how to turn I can't into I can. And that's what I did with that motorcycle trip, with really solid conviction. I just knew I was going to have a great trip, and I did, and I met wonderful people along the way. And then really what came out of that was not only did I believe in myself, I set this challenge, but it just kind of up to the ante. And I thought, okay, now, so what else can I do? Or how can I translate this to help and inspire other women in particular, kind of do something in their life that is bold, basically.
So what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you were doing this trip? And there can be the logistic challenges and the physical challenges, and then there's also that mental and emotional side as well.
Well, what's crazy is that I get most concerned about the littlest things. As an example, my biggest fear, like I am going to macho country, right? I'm going through Mexico and Central America,
Yes,
and I've got
ma'am.
long blonde hair, and I'm 5'2", so I'm not, this overpowering person. My concern was getting to a gas station and accidentally tipping the bike over and not being able to pick it back up, like looking like an idiot. Like that was my biggest fear. Isn't that funny? And I have that same kind of fear of like public transportation. What happens if I get into a big city and I don't know how to work the machine to get a card to pass through
Right.
the metro station or something? So I build those kinds of things up in my mind, and then getting through border crossings or doing other things like I'll deal with that. I just don't want to look like an idiot. So it's really funny how how we all have our own little things kind of built up in our mind. So in terms of the actual challenges, they were all just made up in my head because sure, my butt was sore because I had long riding days, or I got
Sure.
lost in Mexico City going around in circles trying to figure out how to get out the other side. Those things are just like, those are to be expected, and just not, you just deal with that stuff.
Right. So as progressed on that journey, what were some of the biggest takeaways that you got from the experience itself? And again, there may be cultural things that might be personal. What was your biggest takeaway?
Well, one of the best pieces of advice that I received from anyone was become their sister, become their friend, and become their daughter. So if I ran into any challenges, just remember to be a friend to people, because we all
Sure.
want the same thing, right?
Yep.
And so a really good example of that was that I was at the Guatemala border crossing, and I was having a hard time convincing them to let me into the country. And I really think what they wanted was a bribe, and I just wasn't willing to give money just to get through the border. So
Sure.
I probably sat for hours. And in the meantime, I saw people going back and forth. And I thought, man, why are they letting them go? And I was so frustrated, and I was really angry. And, I'm sure I was stomping around, trying to get my way. And then I
Mm-hmm.
remembered this advice: become their friend. So then I started buying Cokes for everyone, and I started taking selfies and saying, hey, like selfies before selfies were popular, right? But just
Back when we had to actually turn a camera around.
Yeah, exactly. Or have someone else take the photo.
Sure, there was
So,
that.
yeah. So I, just started, taking photos and having fun with it. And then suddenly my paperwork got signed and they let me through. It just broke the barrier down. So that was a big lesson for me, is that, not letting my frustration get to me. And I can use that in my everyday life when
Yep.
I get on the phone with my Wi-Fi provider or with my cell phone service provider, and, find out that my bill is wrong, or I got charged for something I didn't know I was going to get charged for. Instead of being frustrated, if I can just be kind and I can be nice, then it's just going to set a better tone. And I may not get my way, but it's just a much better feeling in the end.
Absolutely. Well, so that's really good, like lessons learned and words of wisdom in life that you kind of applied while you were traveling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So as you had to share with family and friends that you were going to be undertaking some of these amazing solo travels, what were their reactions?
Yeah. Well, I had a boyfriend at the time who wasn't very happy about that. But yeah, my family, I think at first, and I grew up in New Jersey. And there's a different outlook on life in New Jersey than there is in Seattle. Seattle is a very progressive city, and people travel all the time. It's just kind of woven into our fabric here. So when I was growing up in New Jersey and I knew I wanted to start traveling, I realized that it was not the norm, not with my family or my friends or coworkers at that point. And so coming out to Seattle was really refreshing, in that we have a huge adventure travel community here. And it feels more I feel like I'm with my people here. So, of course, early on, like I said, I was getting that resistance. But as I kept traveling and kept insisting on traveling more, everyone kind of got used to it and like, oh, Beth's gone off on another crazy adventure.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was your biggest fear when you were undertaking? You talked about, the tipping over at the
The
gas
gas
station.
station. Yep.
But what were some of your other fears as you were undertaking? And you can pick that adventure or a different adventure as you were.
So I've always been someone who has just thought I'm a human doing things. And there's nothing stopping me and there's nothing stopping other women from doing certain things. And I always think of Barack Obama. I heard a quote from him once. It's like, I don't think of myself as a Black person. I just think of myself as a person. And that's how I feel about being as a woman. It's like, I just think I'm a woman out there doing things. So I have never really wanted to be categorized as like, oh, Beth Whitman, this woman who's doing, like these adventurous things that women just don't do. It's only recently that I have realized that the way I respond to the world, that my husband doesn't respond that same way. And I'll give you an example. So I'm a runner and I'll be running around my neighborhood and I'm aware of the fact that I shouldn't go out too early in the morning before the sun rises because, I don't want anything to happen to me because there have been some incidences where women have been harassed, not attacked, but
Sure.
harassed. And then I started thinking about, I went running one time in upstate New York when we were visiting family, and I was being followed. I mean, it was a little scary for me. These guys in pickup trucks were following me and like just kind of harassing me. And I thought, gosh, my world really is different, and I've just been kind of ignoring it. Like I just go on about my day, and I was like, oh, yeah. My husband doesn't have to deal with that kind of thing. That's not the kind of thing he has to worry about. So I think that kind of the big picture here, especially for solo female travelers, is that we do have to worry about other things. And I've had to worry about those things myself, but it's just been so ingrained and kind of so second nature to me that it's just like, okay, I have to do these things, these added things to protect myself. And I think every woman, should think about that and kind of be concerned about that. But I think those are the things over the years that they haven't been on the forefront. I think they've been a little bit more innate. Growing up in New Jersey, I spent a lot of time in New York City, so I think I've got a little bit more street smarts than some people might have grown up with. And I think all of that has just been really innate with me. And it's all like I said, it's only been recently where I've thought, oh, like not everybody thinks that way, but
Absolutely.
I've been forced to think that way over the years.
So part of your passion is helping women develop their confidence for travel,
mm-hmm.
which is one of the reasons why you and I are so well aligned.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think it is that women are lacking that confidence?
Well, I think it starts early on with the kind of programming or the talk that we get from other people of that's not safe. A woman shouldn't do that. You can't leave your family behind. You can't leave your 5-year-old child behind and go take a yoga retreat in Costa Rica. That's not the proper thing to do. So we get these messages. We get a lot of messages about that. And then we start to tell ourselves that same thing, as I said earlier, before we even allow an idea to come to fruition.
Right.
We start to talk ourselves out of it. And I'm trying to retrain myself in terms of that. And I hope by doing that, I can show other women that same kind of path, that they don't have to talk themselves out of it. And here's another example. So I had always told myself that I wasn't a runner, because if I tried to run 2 blocks up the road, I'd be like, oh, all winded. And with traveling so much, I thought, I've got to figure out something that I can do to stay in shape and still travel, because not all hotels have gyms to work out in.
Sure.
So I'll start running. hated running. Tried it for maybe a year. I would do 3 miles around the block and I get winded, didn't like it, found it boring. And then, kind of long story short, I told myself, you know what? This is just another thing that I'm talking myself out of. Why don't you figure out how to become a runner and go do a marathon? And so for a year, I trained with a coach. I got some good gear. I got a little iPod shuffle, loaded it up with podcasts, and then started out running.
Nice.
And I did my first marathon at 50. And I actually did 5 marathons in 1 year, in my 50th year. And so that's like the example that I use, that it's never too late. Like I started running when I was in my late 40s and I did a marathon at 50, and now like there's no end. I'm looking for a 50 miler that I can do, you know? So it doesn't have to be about travel, you know, it can be about anything, but we just tend to talk ourselves out. And if we can challenge ourselves with why I can't do something and figure out how you can do it, then it's going to open up the world to people.
That's amazing. And I think what you've indicated here, though, is, you know, how we get in our own way.
We do, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And if we keep telling ourselves we can't, well, then we can't.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's not really about whether we can or not. It's just, are we willing to put forth the effort? And whether that effort is the physical effort of running a marathon or the mental and emotional breakthroughs necessary to overcome some fears that are holding us back, there's still effort required. And once we decide and commit that we're willing to put forth that effort, we're really unstoppable.
That's very true, and I think that, but it all happens in your mind, because you've got to change your mind first, and then put the effort in. And I think, you know, one of the things that has really helped me over the last year and a half or so, I've started journaling like every day. I sit down and journal, and I have kind of this kind of method that I use, and then I'll deviate. I'll read a book, and then I'll have these ideas, and this stuff comes out. But it doesn't matter. Every morning when I sit and do that, I have these new challenges, and I have challenges about the way I'm thinking of things. And I think, oh gosh, like having just written that out, I have a new idea about how I've been living life, and now here's like a little shift that I can make to make some improvements in that area. And I think it's getting to know ourselves and questioning ourselves, and not just anesthetizing ourselves with television and, you know, food and drink, and just being open to the world and being open to ourselves.
Well, and I think that we hit this point in midlife where we've just been living a routine. And that routine is not always something that we've chosen. Yeah, maybe, and I don't have children, but, you know, our kids certainly, you know, influence a routine, or our significant others, and all these regular work hours, all these outside forces create the routine. And then oftentimes, due to exhaustion or whatever, we just become this very robotic livers of this routine. And one of the things I love about travel is it breaks the routine and allows you to call to question, am I choosing this or not?
Right. Yeah. You're absolutely right about that. That travel is a huge thing when we're challenged by the unusual and by things that we're not used to. It forces us to make decisions and kind of look at our lives and pare down. Also, when you've got just a suitcase that you're living out of, and it makes you realize what's important in life as well.
It does really just allow for an amazing amount of reflection. And I came from corporate, and as a manager, the conversation that I'd have with people of all ages at all points in their lives were that you're choosing to come into work every day. You know, this is a choice. Now, when you make that choice, you know, there's certain things that are expected of you, but you are free to make a different choice if this choice is no longer working for you.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that they have the freedom of that choice, though. And hey, I've been in that world too for a very brief time. I was in that world where I had a job that paid a lot of money, and I just thought, hang in there, Beth, just stick with it, make some money, and then, buy a rental property so you can have, passive income, and then you can go travel. And that was the story that I told myself. And then slowly, I thought, okay, what if there was a different future for me? What if I left this job and did something else? And it turns out now I can I'm not making the money that I was making at that point. I believe that will come. But, I live every day just delighted. And I think I've got, the envy of a lot of people with my lifestyle because I'm traveling so much and I get to meet great people along the way.
Well, the other part is, when we talk about the money side of this, there's also choices that you've made about simpler living that, you're choosing to invest in travel.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah. I've always said to people who tell me they don't have money to travel, and granted, I understand that there are people with hardships and that it is really difficult. But I remember having people tell me like they don't have money to travel, but they had no problem going out and spending $10 to $12 on lunch every day, or $6 twice a day for a Starbucks, triple grande latte with whipped cream, And
Exactly.
if you it seems small, but if you can just put that money into a travel fund, before you know it, you have enough for a flight, and then you can go stay at a youth hostel and, further have, an inexpensive experience.
Well,
It's out there.
And I love it. And we'll come up to talking about some of the trips that you do, because those are amazing adventures as well. But what I really love is when someone decides that they want to do something and they really decide and they put some energy and effort behind it,
Mm-hmm.
there are so many things possible. So one of the women that I do some work with, she wanted to go to Spain and she wanted to take her adult daughter. And next thing I hear back from her, she's like, we're going to Spain. Well, tell me how this came about. Well, doing her research, talking to other people and validating their experiences, she found a company that will host her and her daughter in Spain for, I think, 2 weeks. And they are required to speak English. That's their job. It's it's an English immersion program for people in Spain. And the folks who are coming from all over these wonderful English-speaking countries all over the world are going to be in Spain, interacting. They get to have cultural experiences. And the money is just their airfare to get over there.
Yeah, that's amazing. There's I can't remember what the term is, but I was just reading about it this morning. I was rereading a book that I have, and there's a term for it where when you set an intention, then, I mean, we've all seen it. We just bought a car, and then suddenly we see 6 cars in our neighborhood that are similar or the same color or of the same make and model, and it just becomes part of our awareness. And that same thing happens when we set our intentions, and that's why I think that journaling is so important, is that when I set my intention and I have that kind of imprinted in my mind for the day, I can kind of say, does this align with what my intentions are that I set out this morning? And then I'm aware of the magazine at the massage place, at the spa.
Exactly.
That, there's that destination that I was just talking about. So then it's just kind of top of mind, and the universe just kind of has a way of throwing things at you. And that's so true. And I'm sure that's what happened to this gal who wanted to go to Spain. She had it on her mind so much that these opportunities that she may have just passed her by previously, it came up and presented itself.
Well, and it's great because I recently started exploring Workaway, and I'm finding there's a ton of opportunity for families, young, old, all to go, and they can stay domestic or they can go international and really get an immersive experience. That's actually one of the reasons why I like staying at an Airbnb, because it's an entirely different experience. When I had that opportunity in Fiji, I stayed with a family, and it was very custom that they would feed me. It would be completely rude for me to go out, grab dinner out without them, or to bring my own food back. They wanted me to be a part of their family meal.
I want that place.
It was amazing. And it was like $20 a day. So it was
Oh my gosh.
just crazy. But
Well, we'll have to connect on that because I'm quite interested.
yeah, I'd love to share them with you. It's just that kind of experience is something that we don't get immersed in that way. There's a lot of people who can, but especially coming from that corporate and more business side of things, you know, the ability to stop and step back and then feel welcomed into these homes, and that what you're doing, it's an exchange. It's not just a one-way street where then they were just giving, they were learning about me as well. So it's wonderful to be a part of that kind of exchange.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about a couple places of where you've been, and I know people can find out a lot more on your site, which we'll talk about more in a moment. But where's your favorite? I hate that question, by the way. So you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. I have two favorite places that are completely different. One is Bhutan, and I've been there about almost a dozen times. If for listeners who don't know where Bhutan is, it's a little tiny kingdom in the Himalayas. It's nestled between Northeast India and Tibet. And very few travelers go there, relatively. And there's a high daily tariff that the government imposes, and that kind of cuts down on the number of people who can go. It's not a backpacker place. And really their intention is to keep the backpackers out, mainly because they cannot, their infrastructure is such that they cannot accommodate. There's limited hotels, there's limited restaurants. So they just have to cut back on, or keep the numbers down in terms of who travels there.
Got it.
Bhutan is one of them. Love Bhutan. And then kind of the opposite end of that is Papua New Guinea. Now, Papua New Guinea, again, many people don't know where it is. It's half of an island just north of Australia. So one half of the island, the eastern part, is Papua New Guinea. The other half is West Papua, which is part of Indonesia, which is really strange. So they share an island, two different countries. Papua New Guinea is an independent country. They got independence from Australia, I think, in 1974.
Okay.
So 850 tribes. They all speak a different language.
Wow.
There's a lot of tribal fighting that goes on there. Never aimed at the tourists, aimed at each other between the tribes. If you ask the tourism folks, tourism authority folks, they'll tell you that cannibalism is no longer practiced. But if you read the newspapers, you'll find that people have been arrested most recently for cannibalism, again, eating their enemies. It's an amazing place. It's crazy fantastic, and I love it. Just complete opposite to Bhutan. Bhutan is probably the safest place on the planet that you can go. While I wouldn't say PNG is is the least safest. It's not a safe place, especially the bigger cities, but under the right conditions, it's the most amazing place. And I've been there probably 8 times or so. And I go back every year. I lead tours there. I lead tours to Bhutan as well. So, those are among my favorites.
That's amazing. So I'd like to hear a little bit, as people are thinking about, oh my gosh, she's leading these crazy tours, which sound amazing. Who goes on those tours?
Yeah. So they're not all crazy. And even the Papua New Guinea trip is not crazy. We go for a big festival and it's all very safe. My typical client so I do a lot of women only tours because that's the kind of the niche that I have found myself in.
You bet.
My typical tour participant is a woman, 45 to 65, divorced, widowed, husband doesn't like to travel. We certainly have married people who come, kind of leaving the husband and the child behind, or leaving the partner behind. And we've had as young as probably 9 years old and as old as 85 years old. So we've got the whole gamut there. And I love traveling with older people who are just still out there, active. It's so inspiring to me. But I do some treks. I just was in Tanzania and trekked Kilimanjaro with a group, and then went on safari. And then I did a big trek in Bhutan. That was a co-ed trip, by the way. And then did a big trek in Bhutan, a 25-day trek. It's called the Snowman Trek. And that was one of those things where I always told myself I couldn't do it. That was for the serious hiker. That was for the person who is really in shape. This was a 25-day trek up to 18,000 feet. I think we had about 11 passes over 16,000. So it's a lot of up and down. And it's sleeping in a tent every night, carrying your day pack, not carrying all your stuff, but carrying a day pack and having a pretty big support crew in terms of mules and ponies and support staff who are cooking for you. But you're still, you're still out there, boots on the ground, one foot, in front of the other, making it happen. So, but yeah, so, and then I do more tame adventures. India, I've got a tour to India this fall in October, and I do some culinary trips to Seattle, Santa Fe, and New Orleans. I've got a wellness trip to Santa Fe coming up this fall, and trips all over Southeast Asia as well: Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Burma. So yeah, that keeps me busy.
That sounds amazing. So when you're talking about this 25-day trek, you said that was co-ed.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds incredible. How do you make sure that people are physically able to do some of those things?
Well, there's a little bit of trust that's involved in that. A person who joins the Snowman Trek knows themselves pretty well. Like, can I make this trip? And they do a lot of training for it because it really is. It's considered the most difficult trek in the world. So people hear that and they know that they better get their act together.
Got it.
And get trained for it. A little bit trickier is Kilimanjaro, because word is that Kilimanjaro is quote unquote easy because it's not a technical climb, but it's still, I think, 19,341 feet, if I'm not incorrect there. So it was really, really difficult. Because you're going up and back in a really short amount of time. So you're having to acclimate really quickly. And our guides told us, look, on this route, there's probably 5 people a day that are taken down by stretcher. On this route, people come down every day by stretcher.
Wow.
Yeah. So it is a lot more difficult than people think it is, because the average person hears it's not technical. There's not a lot of snow there. They see the photos and they see that it's just kind of a scramble, kind of a walk, but it's high altitude and a short amount of trekking time. So you're not able to acclimate very well. So that, I think the people who are coming down in stretchers usually are those that are not fit and just don't know what they've gotten themselves into.
Sure. Absolutely. It's incredible to think about how, folks are really willing to put themselves into situations that they may not be prepared for. And in some ways, there's part of me that admires the risk-taking spirit of that. Mm-hmm. And then there's another part of me that just wants to say, that sounds crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think if someone is willing to accept the consequences of that, as long as it's not putting somebody else in harm's way, then have at it. If you're with a group and you're putting other people at risk as a result of that, I think that's where it becomes a little bit dangerous. But if you are going in a group, you have to conform to the group. That's the bottom line. But if a person wants to try something, I'm all for that. Spreading your wings and giving something a shot, just not at the risk of hurting somebody else in the process.
Absolutely. So, as you're talking to inspire someone who's considering going on an adventure like you lead, or considering going on their first solo travel, aside from reading your book, which we will talk about to make sure that they know that they can find your book, mm-hmm. What's your biggest inspiration or word of wisdom that you would give people?
I would say just figure out how you can stretch yourself. And that's going to mean different things for different people. For a newly widowed person, Going to New York might be really intimidating. And so I suggest people start small, especially for beginners. Start small, take baby steps, and have a little bit of a safety net. So if that means staying with a friend who lives in New York or Amsterdam or Paris or wherever it is, if you've got a landing spot or you've got someone you can call in an emergency, that in itself is going to give you confidence. And what I believe is that if you have confidence, you're going to have safer travels. And it all comes down to kind of doing some research, having a safety net, and just doing enough research that you're going to feel confident, but not so much that magic can't happen. Where you're making sure that all of your time is scheduled. You want to have some breathing room so that you can have a good time in the process and meet people along the way. So really, I think it's taking small steps and stretching yourself and whatever that means to that person. It could mean hopping on a motorcycle and going across country or going to Central America.
I love that. And yet it doesn't have to, like you said, it could be very simple. And we are completely aligned in this because I'm all about supporting in the baby steps. Mm-hmm. I want people to understand that before you pack your bags and go to Bhutan, you probably should have done a little bit of solo travel yourself locally. Mm-hmm. Go solo in your own backyard, have dinner alone, go to a movie alone, go to a museum alone, and practice so that you know which parts make you anxious, which parts make you uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And then you can put a better plan in place for when you make it bigger.
Right. Yeah. And some people that you bring up a good point. Some people are afraid to go eat by themselves. And, honestly, it's become easier when we have our smart devices and we can be distracted.
Yes.
But, challenge yourself. And I do this personally. Leave your phone at home, leave your iPad at home, go eat, pick up a newspaper, pick up a, paper book, because people are more likely to chat with you if you're staring off into space or you've got a book in front of you rather than a device where you're looking so busy. And meet somebody new. Go hang out at a coffee shop and, just have a conversation with someone and go do something by yourself. And I think that is such a nice step to feeling comfortable with who you are.
It is. And, a lot of people are intimidated by the small talk. And you learn the best things to do when you're somewhere else, when you're talking to a local. Mm-hmm. But if you haven't practiced the art of small talk in a while, it feels really awkward.
Yeah, it does. And, it's funny. I do something when I go to the grocery store or the post office or wherever I am, to have, rather than just to have an exchange with the cashier, I always make it a point to say something like, "What's the best thing that's happened to you today?" And they stop and they're like, "What?" Oh, and then they have to think. And then we have a little dialogue about that. And I get to know the person a little bit. That's not my intention. My intention is just to get them to kind of stop and think for a moment and to be in the moment and to respond to something that's a little bit different rather than just, handing change over, "Thank you, have a good day." And that's making small talk. And it could be as simple as that. You don't have to sit down and chat with the person at the coffee table, next to you at Starbucks, but just to have a nice little exchange with someone. And that's good practice.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to make sure that people know where to find you after our call today. So can you make sure that they know how to connect?
Sure. The best place to find me would be on my website, wanderlustandlipstick.com. And that's WANDER, wanderlustandlipstick.com. I also have a podcast. I'm a fellow podcaster, and that's the Be Bold podcast. And that can be found in all the locations where people download their podcasts. I'm WanderGal on Instagram, and they can friend me on Facebook as well.
Fantastic. And I would encourage you guys, check out her site. There's a lot of great stuff out there, way to encourage people to get out of their comfort zones, go travel solo, see what it's all about.
Yep. And I've got a book called Wanderlust and Lipstick, The Essential Guide for Women Traveling Solo. So people can pick that up, probably Amazon or my own website are great places for that. And I've got another book coming out later this year called Be Bold, discovering your best self through travel and adventure.
Fantastic. Well, that aligns very well with your podcast, and I can't wait to check that out. It's been a pleasure having you on the show today, Beth.
Oh, gosh, it's been so great. The pleasure's been mine. Thank you so much.
And best of luck on your next adventure.
You too.
I love the stories that Beth shared with us today, and I love her very succinct message to be bold. I encourage you to check out some of the things that she shared, as well as her podcast as well. Now that we've reached the end of today's episodes, the conversation doesn't have to end there. Go to www.transformviatravel.com to join our email list, or follow us on Facebook, Transform Via Travel, or Twitter at Go Solo Live. Remember to share this with your friends, subscribe to the podcast Go Solo Live, and if you're so willing, please rate and review our podcast. If you're interested in being a guest, reach out to me directly at Jennifer@transformviatravel.com. And until next time, remember, go solo, not alone.